and it's an ongoing battle. It's not like it's an uphill battle no more, like it once was at one point. You know, but definitely, that is the one side of the receiving is being overlooked as a peer and not being respected or not feeling respected, I should say, as a
Right.
peer. But then the opportunity to help change the narrative, even if it's one meeting at a time.
Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Black Peer Perspective. Today, my co-facilitators and I will be discussing the cost of being a peer. And we're going to start off our conversation with jumping into what attracted you guys or what was most alluring to you guys about becoming a peer specialist. And I'm just going to throw this question out there for anyone to take on because I'm very interested in hearing from you guys first.
I'll go first. I think the most attractive thing about the job was that I would be getting paid to share my story with others, which I don't think a lot of people get to do that, get to have that opportunity, because you don't have to come with anything else but yourself in the job. You know what I mean? Like you never have to like bullshit or anything like that. You just come with who you are.
Feel that?
Yeah.
I think for me, the idea kind of like what Drew said, but more so being authentic, allowing me to be who I am. And I think the benefits of that, once I understood what a peer specialist was, once I understood that, the benefit of that is being myself, but also like Drew said, getting paid to do it, but also recovery in the process. So much potential recovery there for myself, but also helping somebody else. What about yourself, Maya?
So from what I understood about being a peer specialist, I understood exactly what you guys are saying, that you just come to this job with your lived experience, and you use that in a way that creates symbiotic relationships between yourself and a participant. And I've never really heard of something being so explicitly, I don't know, like natural. Like most jobs, you have to come and, like Drew said, you either have to bullshit or you have to come with like a level of educational experience or field experience. And like for us, it's literally just like I got to live my life and like now I can do this job. And so it was very attractive to me that I could be in a position that I never knew existed before. And I had wished time and time again when I was younger and I was in my own recovery that a person like me existed. And so like to be able to be the support that I never had was very much like something I wanted to do. And so I went for it. And yeah, it was pretty much like that. In a lot of ways, the job was what I expected, but also in some ways, it was definitely not what I expected, or there were parts of it that I didn't know came along with it, which is exactly why we're doing this episode of the cost of being a peer, because I think some people might understand what peer specialists do to be what we're saying. Like we show up as ourselves and we get to form relationships, we get to have these two-way conversations, we get to support people in a way that we either did receive or we did not receive. And we don't make it about ourselves, but we're still able to bring that element of ourselves into it. But there's a whole other side of it that I don't think people see, whether it's the teams that we work on or the people that we service, or even like family members and friends who know what we're doing on paper, but not necessarily like being cognizant of what that costs us, so to speak. And so I think that propels us perfectly into the next question of, if you were to say that there is a price to being a peer specialist, what does it what is that price to you guys, if there ever has felt like there was a price on it?
I think the price is that not everybody you meet is going to connect with you on the level that you want to connect with them on. Some people may be overwhelmed by your story and maybe not feel the need to have peer support, and that's just part of the job. You're not going to reach everybody.
I think to sum what I want to say up, the price of hello and goodbye. Because you're gonna run into some hellos where it may be good, but you're also gonna run into some hellos where it may be challenging. That journey, and also having those goodbye moments. Rather, there was a natural, organic graduation for that individual, or the individual going into a crisis and probably required a little more help than we can provide as a team. So I would say definitely the hellos and goodbyes is the price that we pay. You have some beautiful ones, you have some ugly ones, but it's hard not to get attached.
Yeah.
I think there are several different costs to being a peer specialist. And I remember once, like when we first started this podcast, we were working with somebody else, and he mentioned something about this line that kind of just struck me and stayed with me. And he said that it costs to tell your story. So that was the beginning of the podcast. And in a way, we were kind of talking like financially. But also, I think there's definitely like an emotional side to that, where there's definitely a cost of constantly opening up and finding those things that can relate to people. And again, we're striking this balance of, I'm not telling you my story to override your story. I'm not trying to dominate this conversation. I'm not trying to make it less about you. I'm trying to find that middle ground of, you're going through it or you've been through it, and so have I, whether I've already gone through it or I'm still going through it. And this is how I have dealt with it. And like, I hear you, I see you, I recognize your pain, I recognize your struggle. But I think that can take a toll on us. We are making ourselves constantly emotionally vulnerable to people. We are letting them into these parts of our lives, whether we have healed from them or we haven't healed from them. And I think that is something that you can't put a tangible price tag on, but it's something that we have to shoulder, kind of like the burden of. And some things are easier to talk about than others. But I know for myself, there's definitely been some times where I'm like, wow, I'm talking about this thing that I don't even talk about with my own friends because they haven't gone through it and they can't relate to it, or I don't think they would understand it, but I'm talking about this participant. I'm talking about it with this participant. And in a way, it can be very healing, but sometimes it also can, again, that space of vulnerability is just like, wow, now I kind of have to like either tuck it back away or I have to process how I'm feeling afterwards. But that's been my experience. Have you guys experienced anything like that?
Yeah. The tired feeling that you get when you have to like put yourself out there for new clients and then they don't reciprocate the energy that you give off. And then I think it goes back to what Ian is saying, like about how you want to still reach those people, but they're just not going to feel you. And then what if they graduate and they still don't feel you, and you weren't able to give them the help that they needed, or that you thought they needed? Yeah.
I think it could be risky business at times, by putting yourself in a vulnerable position to share vulnerable pieces of yourself to somebody else and not getting a response that we expected to get or hope to get, where it puts you in a position to walk away like, damn, what did I say wrong or what did I do wrong? You know, one of the things that I learned, I'm still learning, is try not to take the work home with you. You know, there's a quote that says, "Every morning, the good people in this world get up and try to empty the ocean with a ladle." Um, you know what a ladle is? It's like that spoon with the holes in it for the
Yeah.
spaghetti. You know, so understanding we can't save everybody, and it's not our job to save everybody, which kind of allows room for acknowledgement and gratitude.
Yeah. I first of all, I love that quote because it just brought imagery to my mind where like the good people get up and they like are all leaving their houses with their spoons and they're like tossing the water over their shoulders and like they're not really making too much of an impact. And I like that because again, the imagery first of all is beautiful, but second, that is essentially what good people are trying to do. So we're like trying to actively do no harm and we're trying to kind of like be the change we want to see and inspire that in others. But there's but so much we can do and like there's definitely an extent to that. And I agree with you guys about the toll that that takes where like we come with pure intentions. Some people definitely move from a place of ego, I think, and make it about like, well, why aren't you being responsive to me? And why aren't you taking my advice? And like, I know because I've been through it. But then for others, which is like us specifically, I think I can speak to us and our experiences because we talked about these things. It comes from a genuine place of like, I just want to connect with you. And I want you to know that the support is here and you can use it however you want, how often you want. But I'd rather you use it because it is here than to not have it. And there were definitely times in my peer work where I would kind of just feel like, why, like, why isn't this person being responsive? But then learning along the way, like, everyone's journey is different and some people just don't want that or they're not ready for it. And so meeting a person where they are is saying like, all right, cool, this is not for you. Whenever it is for you, if it ever becomes for you in the time that you are in this program, then I will be here. And not neglecting that person, but every once a month, at least calling or texting or emailing just to check in and let them know, like, I'm not trying to overwhelm you. You don't have to reach back out, but just know, like, the support is here. So I agree with you guys about that also being a cost.
Giving that
But
reassurance.
exactly.
I have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible to not take the work home with you? Because you basically every day you're coming up to these people, sharing of yourself, and they might not receive that. Do you think it's possible to sometimes just disconnect from all of that and be like, oh, that's just part of it?
Easier said than done. I think it goes into that person's perspective on how attached they are to their work and the discipline level. Yeah. Like recently something happened at my job and whatever the case may be. And long story short, I kind of got suspended or whatnot. So once I was aware I was suspended, I was stripped of all my duties. No contact with clients, like in the middle of wherever I'm at. The only people I should be contacting is my 3 supervisors, letting them know I got suspended from HR. And that discipline, nothing is stopping me from making these contacts now, despite me knowing that I'm suspended. So that discipline level there, for me, I couldn't take it home as much as I normally take it home. Whatever, every day I'm in the mix. I'm in the dance with these people. Rather I'm my clients, my coworkers, whatever. I'm always in the dance. And me being parked, just like in the middle of a play, just being parked, trying not to take it home and stuff. I had to call other people. I felt like an addict. I didn't want to use again. I didn't want to relapse. So let me call some people. Hey, listen, I'm fucked up right now. I wake up to work. The last year, 2 years, I've been constantly into my work, despite every other challenges, that personal issues I may be having. Work was my go-to. Work was my healing process. Whatever issues I was going through. But I don't know. But is it possible not to take it home with you? Yeah, it is possible not to take it home with you. I guess for me, it was kind of forced upon me, but at the same time, I could have been sneaky and still pursued it, but I didn't.
First of all, I'm sorry to hear that you had that situation and it put you in a place of like feeling that way. Like even that is in itself a hidden cost. Like there's like constraints to what we can do. We have a lot more freedom than like a therapist, but then there are still like these unseen kind of like walls that we have to work within. Like there are parameters of what we can and can't do. And if something like that happens and you've built these connections and you look forward to the work that you're doing, then there's definitely that emotional cost of having to, I think it was you who said it earlier, like having to say goodbye. So not only from graduations, but if a situation like that happens, there are situations where people like, they try to commit suicide or they get hospitalized, and like those are things that also take a toll on us as peer specialists. And we're more in tune, I think, emotionally, and not to discredit therapists or doctors or anything like that and make it seem like they don't have emotions, they don't have feelings. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that we are more vocal about ours. We don't suppress it. It's not expected of us, I think, to suppress it. It's very normal for us to experience those feelings and kind of like feel them out loud, because we are people who are in recovery or have recovered. And so like part of that process is working through it in a way that people know about or see about, or like, I'm gonna talk about this thing because it's having this effect on me. But to answer Drew's question about, is it possible to not take it home? I think I'm the wrong person to ask, because I've worked in so many different places that have literally required me to learn how to leave it at work. Like when I'm leaving at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I'm out that door, I'm off the computer, I am not answering any more emails, I'm not reading any more emails, I'm not answering anything until the next day, because I had to learn to find the balance of work and self. And for somebody who just like cares and is very empathetic towards other people and their struggles and what they're going through, I want to answer, I want to be there, but I'm not a crisis worker, and I'm not somebody who can change the world and can save people. And if it's not a crisis, then it's something that we will deal with tomorrow. We will talk about tomorrow. And I've had people try to kind of like push those boundaries and like call me at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. And it's like, bro, I'm eating, I'm cooking, I'm watching anime. Like, this is my time. I've dedicated my time to work for the day. And now this is my time to rest and to rejuvenate and to like pour back into myself. But that is a very intentional process. It's not something that I think is easy. It was not easy for me. There were definitely times I felt guilty, but it had to be learned, because otherwise the cost of being a peer would be that I drive myself fucking crazy, always trying to like be there every time somebody needed something, even if it was something as small as like, I just wanted to talk about nail polish, or I wanted to talk about going and get my hair cut. We'll talk about that tomorrow when I'm on the clock. Right now, I need to take care of me because I've opened up to whoever during this day, and now I need to decompress. So I do think it's possible, but like Ian said, like having that discipline and being intentional about like, this is not the time for this. I need to focus on myself. But what has your experience been like, Drew?
Yeah, leaving somebody when they're having a really bad day is tough. But I like, yeah, when the work is clearly not done, but it's your time off the clock and you're like, I gotta go. But I constantly think about that person, even though I'm not answering emails like you said or picking up the phone or anything like that. I'm still, I think that's what it takes out of me. Yeah.
I think it all stems back to ourselves, right? To a certain extent, with that type of letting go and stuff, the discipline and all that stuff, because I guess depending on our beliefs and our views of what we do, some people do it for the money, some people do it because they're passionate about it, which if you're passionate about it, certain things are probably harder to do than other things are. Like I still believe, peer support never stops though. Peer support's an ongoing thing. It's really no breaks or anything to mix of this. But then it could be a two-edged sword, let me say that. It could be very challenging because it makes you contradict yourself sometimes. Kind of like how I am in that, the discipline is there, but then understanding is an ongoing process. This shit never stops.
Right. So let's use this to segue into our next question, which is, do you guys feel like as a peer, you gain more or you lose more? What has your experience been? Have you felt like you've lost more? Have you felt like you gained more from doing that work? Or was it like a balance for you?
I would definitely say gain more. Rather it was tangible or intangible. There's definitely a lot of gain within this experience, this chapter, this journey in my life. Gives me a lot of clarity also. I grew up with a resistance towards authority or whatnot, growing up because of lousy caseworkers. At the time, it was lousy caseworkers, right? As I got older and started doing the work, and somewhere in transition from me being that participant to me being a professional, me saying, oh, I would never be like this person, I would never be like that person, right? Then you get into the field of doing the work, and then you kind of get hit with boundaries, regulations, rules, policy. You get hit with a whole bunch of different layers of compliance, where it kind of breaks you down into, it breaks you down. You get caught up in that, the corporate aspect of things.
The fucking politics.
Yeah.
Right. You get caught up into that, and get caught up intentionally or unintentionally, rather you say, okay, fuck it, I'm gonna adjust to them, or just naturally trying to play the game that they're playing, but doing it your way to serve what you gotta serve, yeah, that's just my opinion on that.
Okay.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Of course.
I'm sorry about that.
That's fine.
It's okay. Do you feel like you gain more as a peer specialist or lose more, or have you found a balance, like you felt both equally while doing the work of a peer specialist?
I think there are good days and bad days. And I think overall, I think you gain more because you learn with other people about just dealing with this diagnosis, right? you just share your story, and then other people hopefully share theirs, and then you guys get to learn together about things that may not work or things that do work. So I think it's a learning process. It's a great one too. I think you gain more.
What would you say are some things you gained? Like Ian mentioned clarity for him. So I'm just wondering for you, what's like something that you can call upon that you felt like you gained from doing the work of a peer specialist?
When I thought that I was the only one dealing with something, and then I talk to other clients, and then they're going through the same thing, that makes me feel like I'm less alone. That makes me feel like I belong somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
A sense of belonging, I think, is a very powerful thing. That sense of connection is a wonderful thing to gain and to have, excuse me, and to be able to kind of like call upon. I would agree with both of you and say that I think you gain more as a peer specialist. There are some days I feel like you lose just because sometimes it can feel like you are fighting a battle that is so much bigger than yourself, because mental health is experienced so differently by every single person. And it's such a personalized, individualized journey. And we are on those journeys with people for the time that they're in our program and the time that we're supporting them. But I also do think, like, while that is happening and there are like the growing pains and those kind of like disappointments and questions that arise from it, those things in and of themselves are teaching us things. And so the lessons that come out of that, I think, are something that you don't gain doing a job like technology based or working in science. Like, you're working with people, and people are the most, I don't know if fickle is the word, but like, people are they're just so different. And so like, you can learn so much from every person if you are looking for those lessons and taking them on as lessons. And I think that learning how to deal with so many different people and meeting people where they are at is a great thing to gain. And that's something that I've learned. I believe I believe very strongly in the idea of like killing the ego. And this is definitely a job, like we said earlier, that you have to learn how to do that, because a lot of times it's not us that people are not being responsive to. It's themselves, whether they are not ready to be supported, they're not ready to come to support groups, they're not ready to open themselves up, they're not ready to accept that they have a diagnosis, whatever it is. So much of the time, it's not us. We can create cooking groups and music groups and ask people to meet us at the park and go do things with them. And if they don't want to do those things for themselves because they're not ready or they don't want to, and that's not where they are, then it's not about us. And we just have to walk away knowing, like, okay, I did what I could. And when they're ready, I'll do it again. I'll offer that again. And I think that was something that was worth gaining. And overall, like, I grew up very quiet and shy, and doing the work of a peer specialist, I learned so much about the importance of raising your voice and saying, like, this thing is wrong, or maybe we should do this thing differently, and challenging the system that we work out, like, as part of, because we are just one person on a team that is just now really recognizing peers. And I think that that's a separate cost of being a peer specialist, is not always getting the respect that we deserve, whether it's out loud or whether it's through financial means, because peer specialists are absolutely not paid what they should be paid for the work that they're doing. But just that level of advocacy on someone else's behalf, which then translates into like, oh yeah, I can do this for myself too. Like, this shit should not be spoken about in this way when we are in a team meeting. Hello, I'm somebody with lived experience. Like, let's challenge the way we're talking about this and thinking about this. Because if you're talking about it like that with me here, I don't know what you're doing in your own practices, but like, let's be more cognizant of that. And you guys are nodding. So like, do you have anything to add to that point?
Yeah, I just, you see like the science or like everything that goes behind being a peer on the team. Nobody else has to fight for their position like that. Nobody else has to justify why they're here. but we have to do all of that. Imagine the therapist being like, oh, they're just having a bad time, like I'll try to reach them later. Nobody else has to do that. It's just crazy. Like who do we get to talk to about these things? I mean, amongst each other, other than amongst each other, but it's just so much work that goes into the position.
Right.
So,
I agree with you on that, Drew. It's an ugly deal that's on the table for us as peer specialists or whatnot, because of the constant fight that we always in with just being respected, demanding some respect or whatnot. Um, but on the flip side of that, that's opportunity to help continue to craft a narrative that people have on peer perspective, and letting them know it's not just cheap labor. What we're doing actually plays a significant role. We're doing shit you can't do, the clinician. We're getting into places that you can't get into as a psychiatrist or the director, doctor, whatever you want to be, one of them hierarchy mother people or whatnot, and it's an ongoing battle. It's not like it's an uphill battle no more, like it once was at one point. But definitely, that is the one side of the receiving is being overlooked as a peer and not being respected or not feeling respected, I should say, as a peer. But then the opportunity to help change the narrative, even if it's one meeting at a time,
Right. And challenging it and continuing to like push the envelope on that. I agree with you 1,000%. So how then do you personally gauge your success as a peer when sometimes it's not explicitly said, or like you said, people kind of like overlook us or overlook the work we do or minimize it? How do you then know that you are successful at your job? Like how do you go home and feel like, all right, I had to leave it there, but today was a successful day?
I guess politically speaking, getting up every morning and able to come home at night knowing that I did something productive. But then not politically speaking, getting that phone call from one of my participants saying thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Or bumping heads with that one participant that just got so comfortable telling me their life story within our first 2 engagements. It's not going to happen in all my sessions, but that one session out of 30 sessions, that one session out of 25 sessions, which kind of is like an anchor for me as a reminder to let me know that I'm doing something right and it's still heading in the right direction.
Yeah. I was gonna say the same thing about it. It really depends on how people react to you, because you may meet that one person who's very shy in the beginning, and then over time, you have conversations with them and they open up, and then the next time they meet you, it's like, hey, what's up? Like this is what I went through, and like let's have a conversation about that. And I gauge it on how people perceive me.
Yeah. And in a way that kind of can feed the ego in the ways that we don't feel ego driven, but also like when we are dealing with participants that we're not connecting with or are not ready to meet us and be supported by us. And then on the flip side of that, you have those participants who are like building that connection with you. And you always feel it, I think, especially when it was somebody who might have seemed hesitant at first or very shy at first, and then you like build that relationship with them. And I agree that is definitely like a way to gauge success. And I think that we very quickly stop looking for like praise or anything from other
Validation.
members of the team. Huh?
Yeah.
Validation.
Right, exactly. From the people we work with, and it more so like our team, then it comes more so from the participants, and that's how we know like we're doing all right. Or if we're in a team meeting and like, you know, the clinicians like, I haven't reached this person, they're not picking up, and then I'm like, hey, so I spoke to them this weekend and this is
Yup.
how they're doing, just so you know. Those are definitely like ways that I've been like, yeah, okay.
That is so true. Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that that feeling is also what has been a very like much driving factor for being a peer specialist, like having those feelings of like I'm connecting with these people and I know that we're on like a limited time frame kind of thing because they're going to graduate our program, and like typically you don't necessarily like stay in very close contact with them the way that you do while you're working with them. But just to know like in this moment where this might have been a really fucking rough time for you and that's how you ended up in this program, and you are trusting me with being here for you, and you are trusting me with asking questions about how I've dealt with things and how do I think you're dealing with things, and do I have any advice for you or can I just listen to you? Those connections have definitely continued to drive me. And so I'm just wondering for you guys, like, what has continued to drive you as peers when sometimes the losses are great, but the gains are even greater?
I think the gains are worth it. That's why I keep pursuing the job. That's why I keep with the job, because it's every day you're learning more about yourself and the people that you work with and what works and what doesn't work. So that's what keeps me going.
I would definitely say the gains for the most part, but also the personal growth I get on a daily basis. You know, not so much taking the work home with me, but deflecting on a day. Like, damn, what did I do today? Oh, I helped Kevin go to DSS, or I helped Sam register for school, or oh, I was able to talk to this person, or you know, those daily reprieves, those daily reflections.
Mm-hmm.
You know, rather like it don't always have to be coming from a client or a team member, but just my personal reflection of the day. You know, hearing myself say I helped this person, or I was able to get this person there, or, you know, those little ones we overlook at times.
Yeah, I agree. And I also do want to just add that something else that like has always driven me just in the mental health field in general, especially as a peer specialist though, has been the idea of normalizing our experiences. Because there's not really like you hear all the time like, oh, nobody, you know, blames the person for having a broken leg and tells them to get better. And it's the same thing with mental health, but like we are actualizing that and like making it normal to say like, sometimes I'm depressed, sometimes I'm hearing these fucking voices and that is my reality, and I'm just going through that. And we create these safe spaces where like you can talk about that and people are not looking at you like, I don't know what to tell you, where it's more like, no, I know, I feel that, I've been there, I've gone through it. And when we have like peer specialist group, well, peer support groups, we get to bring people together to again like normalize the struggle and normalize the fact that these are things we're going through, and some of these chapters in our lives are harder than others, but they are not forever. They are moments, and we will get through them, and we can get through them better together than alone. And that has continued to drive me because we should be normalizing this. Like, for the amount of people who deal with mental health struggles and have mental health diagnoses, like, why the fuck is some of this stuff still taboo? Why do we shy away from it? Why do we act like if we talk about it, then we are by proxy being judgmental. We're talking about it because it needs to be talked about, and we need to have these safe spaces to talk about these things. So I think that's also a driving factor for me. And we're like wrapping up. We're almost at our like end point where we're gonna wrap up this episode. In retrospect and reflecting on this conversation that we just had, if there was something that you wanted our audience to know, whether it's people who work on teams with peer specialists or other peer specialists or people who are supported by peer specialists, what's one takeaway that you guys would want them to have? Because I know for me, I think the takeaway is definitely just to like be mindful of the fact that even though we are peer specialists and we try our best to be superheroes, we are still humans at the end of it. And we are struggling in our own ways, and we are doing our best to show up for our teams, for our participants, for ourselves. And I just want people to be more cognizant of that. And I want people to also, like the people who are up there and decide how much we get paid, I want them to take all of this into consideration too, because we're doing all of this and giving all of this and talking about this. And again, circling back to what I said earlier, like sometimes we don't get paid enough for that. We are not full-time most of the time. We can't afford to take off our mental health days to take care of ourselves and pour back into ourselves so that we can show up our best selves again. So yeah, guys, if y'all are listening and you're in charge of like financial stuff, please think about that and your peer specialist also.
And for me, it's using your support systems, because there was a time when I was doing the work and I wasn't talking to anybody or just reaching out to anybody, and I was dealing with all this compassion fatigue and all that, but I wasn't expressing it to anybody. So like you said, we're human still. So even though you want to be Superman for somebody, you still should take care of yourself, and talk to people. Yeah.
I would definitely say that to that person that's being supported by a peer specialist, to that peer support person that's actually doing some work out there, I would definitely say it's possible to reach whatever goal you're trying to reach. It's possible to have that connection with that person. It's possible to get through the ups and downs on this journey of recovery. It's not over until you win, you know? And just shouting out all other participants, the clinicians and the doctors, therapists, and so on and so forth. We appreciate y'all too. Even though we don't always see eye to eye, I think we all play significant roles within the system of mental health. And thank y'all. And I wish y'all well as well.
I agree. Shout out to everyone who's working in the mental health system, especially even more so the people who are challenging it and see that there is room for growth and like different ways to do things that will better benefit our participants. So thank you for pointing that out, Ian.
Definitely.
And thank you guys for being here for another episode of the Black Peer Perspective. Thank you to our audience for tuning in and rocking with us for 40-something minutes at this point. We appreciate you, and we are here to keep bringing you the Black Peer Perspective.
And this is the Black Peer Perspective. Thank you.